Okay, we're going to do a little brief overview on KosShelBrocho, how KosShelBrocho was by the Rebbe for a few minutes. And while I'm talking, I will scroll through various pictures from the GEM website of KosShelBrocho throughout the years. They're all available on the livingarchive.org. You can always go there. They have thousands and thousands of KosShelBrocho pictures back from the 1960s. So the concept of KosShelBrocho is brought down by the Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch, Siman Kuf Tzadik, Sif Hey, till the end of the Siman. What the Alter Rebbe explains there, he says the halacha that everyone should participate and partake in the KosShelBrocho and the various dinim that are ramifications of that halacha. We don't, at least I haven't found that there was this official KosShelBrocho by any of the Rebbeim, and even by the Rebbe, it only began not at the beginning of the Nesius. The first time we have a record that I was able to find of the Rebbe giving out wine was on Motzei Pesach of Tafshin Yud Aleph, but that was part of the Mashiach Suda, the different groups and different people. The Rebbe was giving wine. At one point, it changed to Mashke. Shavuos Tafshin Yud Beis of 1952, the Rebbe gave, after Havdalah, the Rebbe gave wine to Rabbi Simpson to give out to everybody. But it wasn't until Pesach Tafshin Yud Gimel, which is over 2 years after the Kabbalas and Nesius, when the Rebbe, at least in the Hanochis, the first time is recorded that the Rebbe gave out KosShelBrocho. The Seder of KosShelBrocho we'll get to in a few minutes. So it was Pesach Tafshin Yud Gimel, and then again Shavuos Tafshin Yud Gimel, Motzei Rosh Hashanah Tafshin Yud Daled. It wasn't. It happened again on the second day of Sukkot Tafshin Yud Daled. There was a Farbrengen, the second day Sukkot, which went till at night, and then was Ma'ariv and Havdalah and KosShelBrocho. Except that on the second day Sukkot, it was Friday, so the Rebbe benched and didn't drink the cup, and he said he's not giving from the KosShelBrocho because you have to make Kiddush first. But he'll send it for the Farbrengen, I guess for the Farbrengen of Shabbos, third day of Sukkot. But Simchas Torah Tafshin Yud Daled, there was already KosShelBrocho. Right. The way it worked was that the Rebbe would bench at the end of the Farbrengen. Oh, so let's go back. The KosShelBrocho was, generally speaking, other than Yetzim and Aklal exceptions, but the general rule was 4 times a year. And that was Motzei Rosh Hashanah, Motzei Simchas Torah, Motzei Pesach, and Motzei Shavuos. And what happened on those occasions was, one of the Chidushim of the Rebbe right at the beginning of the Nesius was a Farbrengen at the end of Yom Tov. Not just a Mashiach Suda at the end of Pesach, but each Yom Tov there was a Farbrengen at the end of Yom Tov where the Rebbe would wash. That one was unique. It was a Farbrengen where there was washing for a Suda. Washing for a Suda means that the Rebbe had challah. Instead of mezenis on the table, there was challah, and there was also water. Because a Suda is bread and water. So the Rebbe would have a becher of wine, and there would be, in the early years, there would be a bottle of soda. There was, I remember in the early Lameds, early 70s, a lime type of lime and grapefruit. And then there was sometimes seltzer. And then the later years was always water. At the end of the Farbrengen, there would have another piece of challah and drink from the water. So there would wash when he came in and then announce if anyone needs to wash before Shkia. Farbrengen was always just before Shkia. On each of those occasions. Pesach, it was with matzah, obviously, not with challah. So those were the 4 times a year when there was KosShelBrocho. So the Rebbe would bench at the end of the Farbrengen on a full case of wine, and then the wine would be kept on the side by barrel eunuch, whoever was in charge. They would cover the cup with the plate, and then there would go Daven Ma'ariv, and then come back to his place, and would make for the same cup that was used for benching would be used for Havdalah. And from the Havdalah, the Rebbe would then say Havdalah, sit down, drink the revius of wine, and then stand up and start pouring KosShelBrocho. Usually the first one to get KosShelBrocho was Rashag, was the Rebbe's brother-in-law. After that, whoever was nearby, and that's how it went. The lines would be 2 lines, one in front and one in back. And as we'll soon also show you a diagram. And the Bachrim, usually it's mainly the Bachrim, there's also Anash as well, but mainly it's the Bachrim would stand on the sides, and as you see in the pictures, would stand and watch and sing Nigunim, and many times the Rebbe would would be ma'ided, would encourage all the singing. Rarely, but it did happen sometimes when the Rebbe actually put the becher down, and for that you have famous pictures where the Rebbe put the becher down and would clap or wave both of his hands to encourage the singing, but that was a very unusual occurrence if that were to happen. During KosShelBrocho, there were many giluyim of the Rebbe. He was very, so to speak, laid back, and people would speak to the Rebbe, they would smile, and they would say things to people. It was a very, very special time. As you can see even in this picture, here's Yankel Hecht, right over here. Certain people would get kiruvim. The Rebbe would have always, as you see in this picture, there would be bottles of mashke on the table, and the Rebbe would give out to shluchim, askonim. The Rebbe would give out a bottle, as you see in this picture. In fact, this is probably kuti rap as a bocher. This is 1970. This is 1975. Tishrei Simchas Torah Tafshin Lamed Vov. So anybody who had anything to do in askonus, the Rebbe would give a bottle of mashke. Motzei Pesach, there wasn't mashke. Motzei Pesach was wine. You'll see in the picture. So if there's a picture with wine, bottles of wine, it was Motzei Pesach. And they were always small bottles. Sometimes you had people who visited and didn't know, and they would ask the Rebbe for a bottle. So the Rebbe would give them a bottle. There were times, strange, unusual, people got. Sometimes the Rebbe gave to a kid, and they didn't know what it was about, and the Rebbe would explain. There's many different stories. We're not going to get into that now. The exceptions that I mentioned earlier of when KosShelBrocho wasn't one of these 4 occasions, the exceptions were Yutas Kislev Tafshin Yud Beis, 1951, Purim Tafshin Yud Beis, 1952, Purim Tafshin Yud Gimel, Lag Baimer Tafshin Lamed Hey. The Rebbe came back from the oil early. He washed, and there was if the Rebbe washed, there would be KosShelBrocho. Chalamed Sukkot Tafshin Lamed Zayin. In the Sukkah, there was a special Suda for the children who go to release time. That means children who come from who are not from. In the release time program, which is a subject of a different discussion, and they had a special farbrengen in the sukkah, especially exclusively only for them and the release time madrichim. We were kids. I remember we were there. They did not allow. They would give very strict instructions. Nobody else is allowed. They didn't allow any of the anash children in there. None of the guests. It was only for them. There's videos about it. And then they were washed, and then they were gave out KosShelBrocho then as well. Other than that, there was Motzei Shabbos Bereishis Tafshin Nun, which is unusual. Rosh Hashanah, Simchas Torah wasn't connected to Shabbos. Normally, when it was 3 days Yom Tov in the later years, there would be, so Friday night was the Motzei Yom Tov Farbrengen, and then Shabbos was 2 Farbrengens. There was the regular Shabbos Bereishis, for example, Farbrengen, or Shabbos Mevorchim, or Shabbos Bereishis, or Shabbos Shuva Farbrengen. And then in the evening, they would come down and wash, and there would be a second Farbrengen. A hemshech to Rosh Hashanah or hemshech to Simchas Torah. But Shabbos Bereishis Tafshin Nun was a few days later, and they were announced there's going to be a separate Farbrengen towards the evening. They were washed, and again there was KosShelBrocho. And then the last time was the famous Shabbos Nosei Tinosei, 1991, when they were walked into shul downstairs after the Shabbos Nosei Farbrengen. They were walked in with a quart and a towel, a quart filled with water, and he walked up to his place. The shul was half empty, or less than half empty. It was quite empty, and the Rebbe wanted a place to wash, and they had to find challah while they was waiting, and never gave out KosShelBrocho at the end from the front of 770. Again, that itself is a whole fascinating story. Generally speaking, a rementlik would be the one pouring the KosShelBrocho into the Rebbe's cup, constantly refilling it, like the Alter Rebbe writes in Shulchan Aruch. As long as it keeps refilling, then it's considered the same. And a rementlik did that until the last Tishrei of his life, which is Tafshin Memches. Rosh Hashanah, he managed to do for a few minutes, 15 minutes, if I remember correctly, and then the Beryl Eunuch took over. Then Simchas Torah, he was already in the hospital, and he passed away Yisur Chag, or the day, Yisur Chag, he passed away. One of the interesting things was that you see here in this picture, the Rebbe is at the end of KosShelBrocho. You see some of the empty bottles here, and the Rebbe is benching, as you see here, the Rebbe benched, and it was very quiet then, no singing. And at the end of all that, the Rebbe many times would say a sicha or a few words, but he would always turn around and say, Sidon noch, if there's still anybody else, any of the stragglers. There were always if there's anybody left who wasn't able to hear. You have a picture of them going home after KosShelBrocho. Going out of 770 in the middle of the night. Okay. Now I want to share with you some other pictures that I prepared before, which will give us an explanation of what's going on. and then we'll finish. This is a diagram of what it would have looked like. So you have here the front of 770. The bleachers from the Fabrengen was there. There was Fabrengen Bima, so those bleachers stayed. There were bleachers in the back, but they were no longer useful for KosShelBrocho because these benches were all became standing benches lines. So there was a line. The Rebbe by Fabrengen sat there, let's say. KosShelBrocho, the Rebbe would have moved up to here or here, around there somewhere. This was a beam. And the Rebbe would stand somewhere over here usually, and these became lines. And they would take 10 people from each line and, get onto the table, this table, and you would walk across. While behind the Rebbe and the Rebbe's bima was another line, which started from the back of 770. And the Rebbe would stand here, let's say, and he would face back and forth, a few minutes facing this way, a few minutes facing that way. And that's the way the lines would go. And then opposite everything, there was bleachers here for people to be able to stand and watch the Fabrengen. Here you have if Motzei Shabbos Havdalah, Yom Tov came out on Motzei Shabbos, so it wouldn't have been Rosh Hashanah or Motzei Simchas Torah because it can't be Motzei Shabbos, so this could be either Pesach or Shavuos. So that's why there's a Havdalah candle there. I think so. Yeah, Rosh Hashanah can't be Friday Shabbos, and therefore Tishrei can't be Friday Shabbos, so it can't be Motzei Shabbos. It must be either Pesach or there. So that's where you had one of the occasions where Havdalah included a candle as well. This is seen probably late 60s. Here you have towards the end of KosShelBrocho, there was standing already, and he's talking. The crowd is already empty. This is in the Lameds. Let's go to this one. Oh, this is a famous one. Motzei Rosh Hashanah, Tafshin Mem, 1979. And this is Chazan Moshe Talashevsky. And when he came up to get KosShelBrocho, this is a very, very freilach Rosh Hashanah and Fabrengen and KosShelBrocho. This is a celebration. Mainly, this was the things were getting back to normal again after Lamed Ches. Lamed Ches was still a frightening. People were scared to go up online. Tishrei Mem, a lot of guests came. It was a Shemitah. The Rebbe was really, really freilach. It was really a special Tishrei, and everyone was excited. Things were getting back to regular. And the big song that there was then. I did it, And over here in this picture, the Rebbe is telling Chazan Talashevsky to add words to this song from the Musaf of Rosh Hashanah. And that's, you're familiar with the song, this is what had happened. And here you see the Rebbe is telling him, this is his son in Australia today. So this is when the Rebbe is telling him to add those words to the song. Here's an interesting picture. I have this hanging in my house. It's always a good topic of discussion. This is Motzei Rosh Hashanah Toshin Memches. And the color picture that I have hanging, this is even more bright red. People wonder if it's a bris. This is the end of KosShelBrocho. And here is the series of that picture from the Living Archives where the Rebbe was standing for hours giving KosShelBrocho, and wine spilled. His barrel eunuch, as I told you, Rebbe Mentlik was no longer well. And over the hours that the Rebbe was giving it, the tablecloth got redder and redder. Another thing to point out is that during those years, they created a little stender to make it easier for the Rebbe. So he was able to lean on the stender, and the Rebbe accepted it, and it made it easier for the Rebbe. They put the Rebbe's siddur under there as well, so it was protected and it didn't get dirty. Another interesting was that from all the years, it was always a small l'chaim cups that they would give out for people to accept KosShelBrocho, which of course took longer until someone came with a bright idea in the early mems. Let's give everybody larger regular cups, and it's much easier for the Rebbe to be able to pour, and the lines will go much quicker. And in fact, that's what happened, and it cut down the time of the lines. Instead of the Rebbe having to pour into a small cup, into a big cup, it was a very small but practical and productive suggestion. So here you see that event, and the Rebbe sits down to bench, a bracha achrena. You can see the camera of Levi Shefredin, and on the left you see the microphone. No, where's the microphone? Oh, you have Beryl Lipska there. I thought there was a microphone. There was always a microphone nearby in case afterwards. Here the Rebbe is standing up, finishing. He's finishing KosShelBrocho, and again you can see the Rebbe is giving out more KosShelBrocho here. Eibs is da noch. Label Groner here is announcing Eibs is da noch. Okay. This is the picture. This is the proper color. Oh, here you have a microphone. Here's what I was talking about. Here you have Yenison Hackner, originally from London, with his microphone always ready, because after KosShelBrocho, many times the Rebbe would speak. Okay, so that is the end. A short overview, very short overview of KosShelBrocho by by the Rebbe.